My husband had been writing me 365 love letters, one for every day of the year. I found them hidden in his desk. After he asked me for a divorce, he had never sent a single one. Tonight we have 5 stories about relationships that hid something nobody expected. Some of them will break your heart. Some of them will restore it. And at least one of them will leave you completely speechless. Let me take you back to where this all started. Story 1 begins. My name is Catherine. I am 44 years old. I live in Seattle, Washington. And 2 years ago my husband of 16 years asked me for a divorce on a Tuesday evening after our children had gone to bed. And I went through the following week in the specific suspended state of someone whose world has been restructured without their permission. His name is Daniel. We had been married for 16 years and had 2 daughters, and I had believed we were in a marriage that was difficult in the ways that long marriages are difficult, and that was still fundamentally solid. Daniel had apparently been believing something different for longer than the Tuesday evening had suggested. 3 days after Daniel asked for a divorce, I was looking for our daughter's birth certificates in his desk for a school enrollment form, and I found a wooden box in the bottom drawer that I had seen before and had always assumed contained old documents. The box was not locked. Inside it were letters. Not a few letters. A great many letters. I counted them later, and the count was 365. Each one was in a sealed envelope. Each envelope had my name on it in Daniel's handwriting. No postie. No address. Never sent. I sat on the floor of his office and I opened the first envelope. The letter inside was dated approximately 1 year before our wedding. It was a love letter, specific, detailed, the kind of letter that describes the person you love in terms that tell them exactly what you see when you look at them. I opened a second envelope. A different date. A different letter. I opened 10 more. All love letters. All unsent. All in Daniel's handwriting across what appeared to be the span of our entire relationship. I brought the box to Daniel. I put it on the kitchen table between us. I asked him what it was. He sat down and he looked at the box for a long time. Then he told me. He had been writing to me since before we were married. Every time he had felt something he had not known how to say in conversation, he had written it down and sealed it and kept it. He had written when he was happy and when he was afraid, and when he had felt the specific love of watching someone he loved sleep, and when he had felt the distance between us that sometimes came, and that he had not known how to close in person. He had never sent any of them because sending them had felt like a vulnerability he had not known how to carry. I asked him why he had asked for a divorce. He said he had been carrying the distance for too long and had not known how to close it, and had run out of ways to try. I told him I had not known there was a distance he had been trying to close. I told him that was because he had been writing to me instead of talking to me. He said he knew. I did not file for divorce. I want to be honest that the decision was not simple. Finding 365 unsent love letters from your husband the week he asks you for a divorce is not a simple thing to receive, and the receiving of it required weeks of therapy and honest conversation, and the specific work of 2 people who have been communicating past each other for years deciding to stop. Daniel and I are in couples therapy. We are in a different marriage than we were before the Tuesday evening, and before the box, and the difference is the specific difference of a marriage that has had its actual contents examined rather than assumed. Daniel sends me letters now, through our regular mail app. Short ones, sometimes a sentence. I have received 47 of them in 2 years. I read every one immediately when it arrives. Some of them say things that the box had been holding for years. I think the box was a conversation that needed a different delivery method, and that we found one. Update: 4 months later. Daniel gave me the box last month. Not as a gesture. He asked me if I wanted it, and I said yes, and he gave it to me, and I have it on my bedside table now. I have read through all 365 letters over the past 4 months. Not in order, not all at once. When I felt ready for the specific one, I opened. Last week I opened one dated from the year our younger daughter was born. It described watching me hold her for the first time in terms so specific and so full that I sat with it for a long time before I put it down. I told Daniel I had read it. He said he remembered writing it. I said I wished he had sent it then. He said he wished he had too. I said he was sending them now. He said he was. That felt like enough. Some things arrive late and are still exactly what you needed. Daniel had been writing for 16 years. But in story 2, the writing was not love letters. It was something else entirely. Something that arrived after a loss and changed everything about how a marriage was understood. Here is what she found. My name is Margaret. I am 58 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and 18 months ago my husband of 23 years passed away from a heart condition that had been building for years, and that had taken him at 61 in a way that had been both expected and completely impossible to be ready for. His name was Gerald. He had been an accountant, methodical and organized, the kind of man who labeled things and kept records. 3 months after his passing I was organizing his home office, and I found a journal in his desk drawer. A small leather-bound one, clearly well-used, clearly private. I sat at his desk and I opened it. The journal went back 7 years. Gerald had been keeping it for 7 years and I had not known. What it contained was Gerald's honest interior record of our marriage. Not complaints, not resentments, not anything that would have destroyed what I understood about our life together. What it contained was love in the specific private form of a man who had not known how to express it in conversation, and who had been expressing it in a journal that he had apparently expected no one to read. He had written about watching me at breakfast, about a specific laugh I had that he had found in pages what he had never found in words when I was in the room. He had written about our daughters and what watching me with them had meant to him. He had written about the years when our marriage had been difficult, and about what he had understood during those years that he had not been able to say. He had written about being afraid of his diagnosis. He had known about his condition for 3 years before he died, and about not wanting to worry me and about watching me live my life with a fullness that he had found beautiful and had not wanted to diminish by making me afraid. He had been protecting me for 3 years from a fear he had been carrying alone. I sat at his desk and I read every entry in one sitting. I was there for 4 hours. When I finished I sat with the journal closed in my hands, and I thought about 23 years of a marriage that I had understood one way, and that the journal had shown me in a different way. Not correcting what I had understood but adding to it a layer that had been present and invisible, and that was now visible and permanent. I could not tell Gerald what I had found. That is the specific grief of finding something in someone's private things after they are gone. The information arrives when the conversation it belongs to is no longer possible. I have talked to my therapist about the journal. She says finding it was a gift even though the giving of it was not intentional, and I think she is right. I think Gerald would have been embarrassed for me to read it, and I think he also would have been glad. I keep the journal on my bedside table next to a photograph of us from our 20th anniversary. I read an entry occasionally when I miss him in a specific way. The entries are always there and they are always his, and they are the closest thing I have to a conversation I cannot have, and I am grateful for every word of them. Update: 3 months later. My younger daughter found out about the journal last month. I had told my older daughter and she had mentioned it. My younger daughter asked if she could read it. I told her some of it was private between her father and me, and that I would share the entries that were about her and her sister. I read her 4 entries. The one from the day she graduated from college, the one from her wedding, one from when she was sick as a child that Gerald had written the night she recovered, and one from an ordinary Sunday afternoon when she had called him just to talk, and he had written afterward about what her voice sounded like when she was happy. She cried through all four. When she finished, she said she had not known he had felt all of that. I told her he had felt all of it and more and had written it down because he had not always known how to say it. She said she wished she had known. I said I thought he had hoped she would know someday through something, and that the journal was that something. She held it for a while. Then she gave it back to me. I put it back on my bedside table where it belongs. Gerald had kept his journal for 7 years. But in story 3, what was kept was not a journal. It was a secret that had been maintained for 4 years inside a marriage. And it was not discovered by the wife. It was discovered by a complete stranger. Here is how that happened. My name is Sandra. I am 41 years old. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and 16 months ago I was having lunch alone at a restaurant near my office, when a woman I had never seen before sat down across from me uninvited, and said she needed to tell me something, and that she was sorry in advance for what it was going to do to my afternoon. I want to tell you who this woman was and why she sat down because both matter. Her name was Karen and she was 44 years old, and she had recognized me from a photograph. Not a photograph I had posted anywhere publicly. A photograph my husband had on his phone that she had seen when she had been dating him for 4 months, without knowing he was married. My husband's name is Michael. We had been married for 11 years. Karen had met Michael at a professional networking event 8 months before she sat down across from me. They had dated for 4 months before Karen had found the photograph on his phone. A photograph from our last anniversary that Michael had apparently not thought to delete, or had decided did not require deletion because Karen had not been given access to his photos before that day. Karen had ended things with Michael immediately upon finding the photograph. She had spent 4 months deciding whether to tell me. She had recognized me from a different photograph Michael had on his phone. One of just me that she had seen earlier in their relationship, and that she had thought nothing of at the time. She had seen me at the restaurant by chance, and had made the decision in the moment to sit down. She had sat down because she said she had a daughter, and she thought about what she would want someone to do if her daughter were in my position. I sat across from Karen for 40 minutes. I asked the questions I needed to ask. She answered every one. When she left, I sat alone for another 20 minutes, and then I called my attorney. The conversation with Michael happened that evening. He confirmed everything Karen had told me and added things she had not known. The relationship had not been the first. There had been 2 others in 11 years that he described to me with the specific care of someone who understands that the truth is going to cost them everything, and who has decided the truth is what they owe. I filed for divorce 6 months ago. It was finalized 2 months ago. Karen and I have exchanged 3 messages since the restaurant. The last one said she was glad she had sat down. I told her sitting down was one of the more courageous things anyone had done for me, and that I was grateful. She said she had thought about my daughter. We have one, she is 9, and that had been what had made her sit down. I think about a stranger sitting down uninvited at a restaurant table, and about the specific courage that required, and about my daughter, and I think that Karen did something for my daughter by sitting down that my daughter will not know about for years, and that it was the right thing, and that I hope someday I am able to do something similar for someone who needs it. Update 4 months later. My daughter asked me last month why our family had changed. She is 9 and she had been patient with the explanations we had given her, and had clearly been thinking about the larger question for longer than she had been asking it. I sat with her, and I gave her an honest age-appropriate version. I told her that her father and I had not been honest with each other in the ways a marriage needed, and that the marriage had ended because of that, and that both of her parents loved her, and that would not change. She thought about it for a moment, and then she said, "Is it because Daddy lied?" I told her that was part of it. She said, "I thought so." She is 9 and she had thought so, and I held that for a long time after she went to bed. I think children know more than we think they know, and that honest age-appropriate explanations respect what they already know rather than trying to replace it. Karen sat down because of someone's daughter. In story 4 it was also about a daughter. But this daughter had been kept a secret for 7 years. And the woman who found out was not the wife. She was the daughter herself. Here is what she discovered. My name is Jennifer. I am 34 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. And 3 years ago I sat at my father's bedside in the final days of his life and discovered that the family I had grown up believing was his primary family was not his only family, and that I had a half-brother and half-sister who were at that moment in the same hospital visiting a man they had known as their full-time father, while I had known him as a presence that came and went with explanations I had been too young to question and too old to have accepted if I had been paying the kind of attention that information like this requires. My father's name was Robert. He passed away at 64 from a progressive illness that had given us several months of difficult goodbye. My mother and Robert had never married. She had always described their relationship as complicated, and I had accepted complicated as the shape of it without examining what complicated meant specifically. What complicated meant was that Robert had a wife. Her name was Linda. She was 62 years old, and she had been married to Robert for 38 years and had 2 children with him. A son named James who was 37 and a daughter named Patricia who was 35. I was 31 at the time. My mother had known about Linda. Linda had apparently not known about my mother or about me. Robert had maintained 2 separate lives with the specific logistical commitment that such maintenance requires, and had apparently done it successfully for 31 years without Linda discovering it. I found out at his bedside because Robert, in his final days, had decided that dying with certain things unsaid was something he was not willing to do and had told me the full story during a visit when my mother had stepped out and we had been alone. He told me about Linda. He told me about James and Patricia. He told me they were in the hospital in the same building visiting him on a different schedule that he had managed to maintain even through his final illness with the specific careful organization of someone who had been doing this for decades. He cried when he told me. I held his hand because he was my father and he was dying, and the dying was real even when the life he had lived was more complicated than I had known. I met Linda in the hospital corridor 3 days before Robert died. I had known she would be there, and I had decided that meeting her was something I needed rather than something I could avoid. She looked at me and I looked at her, and I said, I am Jennifer, Robert's daughter. She said she knew. He had told her about me. He had told her about my mother. He had done in his final week what he had not been willing to do in 31 years, and had told both of us about each other while he was still alive to do it. Linda and I stood in a hospital corridor for 20 minutes. We talked about Robert in the specific careful way of 2 people who have a significant person in common and significant grief in common, and a significant complication in common, and who are deciding in real time what to do with all 3. We have spoken 4 times since Robert's death. The conversations have been careful and honest and have produced a relationship I do not have a name for. She is not my stepmother in any functional sense, and she is not a stranger, and she is someone who loved the same person I loved in a way that the person we loved had kept separate, and that we are deciding to not keep separate. James and Patricia know about me. James has not reached out. Patricia has. We have had coffee twice. The coffee has been the specific careful warmth of 2 people who share something significant and are figuring out what to do with the sharing. Update 4 months later. Patricia came to visit last month. Not for coffee, a real visit, an afternoon at my apartment, meeting my partner and my cat and seeing where I lived. She brought photographs. Some of them were photographs of Robert that I had not seen. photographs from his life with her family that showed him present and full and real in a way that the version of him I had known had always had a quality of incompleteness that I now understood was because he had been incomplete with me by design. Looking at photographs of my father being a full-time father to someone else is its own specific experience, and I am still finding language for it. Patricia sat across from me, and she said she was angry at him. I said I was too. She said she was also glad to know me. I said I was glad to know her too. We sat with both of those things for a while, and I thought that holding anger and gladness simultaneously about the same person and the same situation was one of the more honest things I had done in 3 years, and that Patricia sitting across from me was part of what made the honesty possible. Jennifer found out the truth at her father's deathbed. Our final story tonight. Story is about someone who found out the truth at a completely different moment. A happy moment. The happiest moment of her life. And what she found changed the meaning of that moment in ways she is still figuring out. Here is the last story. My name is Rebecca. I am 32 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, and 2 years ago I got married in a ceremony that I had planned for 18 months. And that was beautiful in every way I had intended. And that contained a revelation that I had not planned, and that I have spent 2 years trying to understand what to do with. My husband's name is Thomas. We got married on a Saturday in June with 120 guests. The ceremony was perfect. The reception was warm. The revelation happened at approximately 9 p.m., when a woman I had never seen before approached me at the reception and introduced herself as my birth mother. Her name is Carol. She is 54 years old. She had given me up for adoption at 22 under circumstances she described, when I eventually let her speak fully, as the circumstances of a 22-year-old without support, and without a path she could see that included keeping a child she had not been prepared for. Carol had spent 30 years trying to find me. She had found me through social media 14 months before the wedding, had found my public photographs and had understood from them and from some additional research that she had found the right person. She had debated for 14 months whether to reach out and how, and had made the decision a decision I have spent 2 years examining from every available angle to come to my wedding. She had obtained the venue information through a mutual connection she had found through my social media. She had come as an uninvited guest to a wedding of 120 people because she had decided that the wedding was the moment that she wanted to be present for my life for the first time. I want to be honest about what I felt when Carol introduced herself at my reception, because the feeling was not simple. I had just married the person I loved. I was in a white dress. I had champagne in my hand, and a woman I had never met was telling me she was my birth mother at my wedding reception. I excused myself. I found Thomas. I found my parents, my adoptive parents who are my parents in every complete sense and who were at the wedding and who I needed to see immediately and who I found at a table and who I told, and who went through a sequence of expressions I will not describe here because they belong to them. My mother cried. My father held my hand. Then Thomas and I made a decision together in a corner of our own wedding reception. We decided to speak to Carol rather than have her removed because she had come a long way to be in a room with me, and because whatever she had done by coming without invitation, she had done from a place that was not malicious. We spoke to Carol for 20 minutes in a side room off the reception hall. She told me what she had told herself about the decision to come. I told her what I had felt when she had introduced herself. I told her that the wedding was a complicated choice, and that I understood something about what had driven it, and that I needed time and space, and that she was going to need to respect both of those things if there was going to be any relationship to build. She said she understood. She left the wedding. Thomas and I returned to our reception and danced and cut the cake and sent our guests home, and went to our hotel room, and talked until 3 a.m. about what had happened, and about what we were going to do, and about the specific strangeness of a wedding that had contained everything we had planned and something we had not. Carol and I have been in contact for 2 years. The contact has been careful and at my pace and has produced something that I am still defining. It is not a mother-daughter relationship in any conventional sense. My mother is my mother, and that is not a position that needed to be filled. It is something else. Something that belongs to the specific situation of two people who share biology and history and 30 years of separation, and one wedding reception, and who are figuring out what that adds up to. Update 4 months later. Carol and I had coffee last month, our 7th coffee in 2 years. The coffees have gotten progressively less careful and more ordinary in a way that I think is the right direction. She asked me about Thomas. I asked about her life. We talked for 2 hours about things that were not the wedding and not the adoption and not the 30 years. At the end she said she was glad I had let her stay that evening. I said I was too most of the time, and that sometimes I was still working on it. She said she understood and that she would keep showing up at the pace I could manage. I said that was exactly right, and that the pace I could manage was 7 coffees in 2 years, and that I thought I could manage more. She said she would be there for more. We said goodbye in the parking lot. I drove home and I thought about a wedding reception and 20 minutes in a side room and 7 coffees, and about what 2 years of careful building looks like when you are building something that does not have a name, and I thought it looks exactly